What's up, everybody? So, in a recent video, I had stated that sexism doesn't exist, or at least in my title. Now, look, you could only make your title so long, which is why, in order to understand what I mean by that exactly, you ought to listen to what I have to say in the video and carefully at that. Listen carefully. Don't just wait to speak, is what I'm saying. Anyway, sexism as it is defined doesn't exist, right? When I said that sexism doesn't exist, some people were left confused, befuddled, and disagreeing, saying that it does exist. Yeah, but hold on a minute. It's just a concept. Now, something like violence is a concept, but it's also a real thing that we can all point to in the real world, right? We see it, we point to it, we all call it violence. That's objectively true. Now, I can't necessarily, maybe somebody can, but I can't necessarily prove that violence is objectively true. But I don't have to, because we all agree that that's what that is, right? When we look at it, we say, hey, that's violence. We all agree. So I don't have to prove that it's objectively true, right? No one's going to contest me on that. And if they do want to contest me on that, then I'm not even interested in having a conversation with them, because if violence doesn't exist, then if you believe it doesn't, then you're irrelevant. I'm not even interested in interacting with you at all, right? Why would I waste my time? Anyway, violence against women also exists, right? We could point to, I hope anyway, to a woman, and if she's being aggressed upon or violated or attacked, right? We could say that that's violence against a woman, and if there's more than one, then that's violence against women, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that it's sexist just because it's violence against a woman, right? Why? Sexism, on the other hand, well, that we can't point to that, right? Well, some people point to it and say, well, that's sexism, but then other people say, no, it isn't. So it cannot be objectively true, right? It seems to be very subjective. There's no agreement as to what's sexist and what isn't. There's no consensus, right? Because it doesn't exist. It only exists as a concept, and a very subjective one at that. Because, as I stated in that video, if sexism is discrimination, sexual discrimination, right, against men or women, well, then being a heterosexual is sexism. And if sexism is, as it is defined, something bad, then you, being a man or a woman, you're bad, right? And even though I can't necessarily prove that it's objectively wrong to say that, all of us would agree that being a man or a woman cannot be bad, right? Just by simply being a man or a woman, how can that be bad? It just is, right? It's neutral. So sexism, as it is defined, doesn't exist. It's just a subjective concept that really, it doesn't mean anything. And if a concept has no meaning, then of course it cannot exist in the real world, right? It's really that simple. Now look, the same could be said about veganism, at least as it is defined by the Vegan Society, which seems to be the definition that most of these ethical vegans, at least here online, subscribe to, right? I've always stated that veganism is nothing but a dietary preference, and all these virtue signaling vegans try to paint it as something else in order to get, these mythical societal credits and, to climb that ladder of virtuosity. Veganism, as it is defined by the Vegan Society, does not exist, right? All you got to do is, well, read the definition and think about it a little bit. So let's do that. Quote, veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. Does it state that you have to eliminate all forms of exploitation 100%? No. As far as it is possible and practicable, right? It's subjective. Well, who defines possible or practicable, right? Who? You. I do. Everybody defines that for themselves. So long as I make conscious choices about what it is that I eat or clothes that I wear, insofar as making sure that I exclude, as far as it is possible and practicable, which is completely and utterly up to me, all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals, right? So, in other words, I could be consuming meat from sustainably and humanely raised animals. I could make sure that, I don't buy any of that eco leather. I just buy real leather, right? For example, if I am to buy, clothes or shoes or whatever, a car with leather bucket seats, then as long as I do that and I'm conscientious when it comes to my food or clothing choices, making sure that I choose to exploit animals as little as possible, and it's up to me what that means, right? Because all of this is very subjective and wishy-washy, then I'm vegan, right? But a vegan would turn around, just about every vegan out there would turn around and say, no, you eat meat, then you cannot be vegan, right? Because, as I stated, veganism is nothing but a dietary preference. That's what it started as, and then at some point it was hijacked by animal rights activists. Veganism was the dietary preference. It was hijacked by animal rights activists, and they fucked it all up. Either they're not too intelligent or they hadn't thought about it long and hard enough, and they just dropped this definition, which is so open-minded, so wishy-washy, and so subjective, and it could be anything you want it to be, right? Which is why vegans don't agree on what it means to be vegan exactly, right? For some of them, eating eggs is okay, or not eggs, honey, for example, is okay. Eating non-sentient animals is okay, right? So much as vegans yap about sentience, right, in this YouTube community, saying that they adhere to this definition, there's nothing in this definition that refers to sentience. Sentience isn't even mentioned in this definition, right? But they inject sentience into it when it's convenient, right? Because it's completely subjective. There's nothing about sentience in the definition of veganism, which is why some vegans think that it's vegan to eat non-sentient animals. And some vegans, like Vegan Gains, think it's okay to murder and eat non-sentient human beings, right? And most vegans would disagree with that because, well, you're eating meat, right? Some vegans think it's okay to eat roadkill, and others do not. There's no agreement on what it is to be vegan. Some vegans think that it's okay to have pets, others do not, right? Because the only thing that vegans agree on is that you don't eat meat or eggs or dairy. That's the only thing that they really agree on. Why? Because veganism is nothing but a dietary preference that's been hijacked by animal rights activists who simply don't got their shit together. Why? Probably because they're batshit crazy or extremely cunning. I don't know, because this sort of definition gives any vegan the right to, well, completely and utterly reject or ignore the fact that their diet, probably, it's arguable, kills more and causes more animal suffering and kills more animals than someone who's eating meat conscientiously, right? That's very possible, actually, but they reject that reality. They act as if crop deaths either don't exist or they're unintentional, as if creating and designing pesticides specifically to kill animals wasn't intentional, right? As if sending hunters or dogs or what have you out into fields to kill sentient animals, as if that wasn't intentional, right? They're in complete and utter denial while projecting that onto people who eat meat, right? Oh, well, if you knew what was happening in these slaughterhouses, you wouldn't be eating meat, right? Well, hey, all they're doing is projecting because they want to reject the reality of what's happening in plant food production and how much animals suffer, right? But then they fall back on this, when you hit them with that, they fall back on this as far as it is possible and practicable, right? Which they get to define for themselves. And if that's the case, then I get to define that for myself. And in that case, I'm also vegan, right? Of course I am. But no vegan, once again, would agree that I am because I eat meat. Because veganism, it, as it is defined by the vegan society, it doesn't exist. Veganism is nothing but a little bitch-made dietary preference for a bunch of weirdos who think that eating a deficient diet is helpful. I mean, it doesn't make any sense on any level, right? Veganism, unless you want to say it's nothing but a dietary preference, throw out all these emotional attachments to it, right? All these virtue signaling designations, such as it's somehow more ethical than anything else. Throw all that bullshit out, right? And call it a dietary preference. Because if you attach any more meaning to it than that, it doesn't really exist. Or you have to agree that I am vegan. So, veganism, as it is defined by just about every ethical vegan out there, so-called ethical vegan out there who subscribes to this here definition, doesn't exist, right? It's really that simple. Thank you for watching.